You wake up in a normal hospital room, but you're not here to be healed. You're here to be measured. Your fear, your confusion, how much stress your body can handle before it fails. And the most important detail is this: you never agreed to any of it. When people hear human experiments, they imagine secret torture chambers or insane scientists. But most of the real ones looked nothing like that. They happened in hospitals, universities, clinics, and government programs, funded, approved, and documented. This isn't just a list. These are 4 real experiments: what they were designed to do, how they actually worked, and what it felt like to be inside them as a human being. And the most terrifying part of all, how normal it all looked. First, a program that targeted your mind, memory, identity, your sense of what's real. And here's the scary question: if someone can control your environment, your sleep, your senses, your chemicals, can they control you? And as you watch, remember this: none of these began with screaming. They began with proposals, budgets, approvals. This is what it was like to be used as a human experiment. MK Ultra begins in 1953, and it isn't one study. It's a whole CIA program with sub-projects. The goal: behavior control. You think you're part of a normal meeting, a normal study, or a normal night out. You don't sign anything. You don't get warned. Because the point is to see what happens when you don't know you're being tested. Now imagine you're the test subject. You think you're in a regular study or a regular night out, but you're dosed without being told because surprise is part of the method. Suddenly, the room feels wrong. Your thoughts feel borrowed. MK Ultra explored a menu: LSD and other drugs, hypnosis, isolation, sensory deprivation, and interrogation tools. They weren't just asking, what does this drug do? They were asking, can we predict a person's behavior or override it? Here's a detail people miss: sensory deprivation wasn't relaxation. In MK Ultra-related research, people were placed in conditions designed to reduce input, light, sound, time cues. When your brain can't anchor reality, it starts inventing it. That's where panic turns into paranoia. And then there were safe houses. Instead of a lab, picture a normal apartment. People get lured in, dosed, and observed, sometimes through hidden setups, while someone takes notes like it's a wildlife documentary. That's the evil. The setting looks ordinary. One of the most infamous cases linked to MK Ultra is Frank Olson, an army scientist who was secretly dosed with LSD and later died after falling from a hotel window in 1953. Here's what being a subject feels like. You lose trust in your own senses. You start watching your thoughts like they're coming from someone else. And even after the drug fades, the question stays: was that a nightmare or a human decision? MK Ultra was stopped in 1973, and a lot of records were destroyed. So imagine surviving and trying to prove it. No paperwork, no consent form, no clean trail, just your memory, after someone tried to mess with memory itself. And that leads to the next horror, because some experiments didn't just break minds. They broke bodies, families, and entire communities for decades, while the victims were told they were being helped. Tuskegee, Alabama, 1932. You're promised free medical care. You're told you'll be treated for bad blood. It sounds vague, but you trust it because doctors are respected and your options are limited. And because you need care, you say yes, thinking this is help, not a trap. But the real goal is chilling. Observe the natural course of untreated syphilis. The study involved about 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, 201 without. You weren't being cured. You were being watched. You're brought back repeatedly for tests and procedures. Even painful diagnostics could be framed as special treatment to keep people participating. And here's the psychological hook. Once you've invested years, you trust the doctors more, not less. Then the world changes. Penicillin becomes the standard treatment by the 1940s. In a normal story, that's the ending. But in Tuskegee, treatment was withheld even after it was widely available, because curing you would end the study. So you get sicker and think, maybe it's me. You age, you struggle, you keep showing up because the system tells you it's care. But behind the scenes, your decline is being turned into charts, progress notes, valuable data. That's the horror. Suffering converted into paperwork. And this wasn't contained to one man. The harm spread. Wives could be infected, and children could be born with congenital syphilis. So it's not just an experiment on a body, it's an experiment on a family line. That's why it shattered trust for generations. And then the detail that still shocks people. The study continued, year after year, decade after decade, until finally the public learned the truth, and it ended in 1972. That's 40 years. People picture secret bunkers. Tuskegee was worse because it looked official. Clipboards, appointments, follow-ups, the mask of healthcare. And that mask is exactly why the damage was so deep. You did what society taught you, trust your doctor, and got used. After Tuskegee, you'd expect the world to never cross that line again, but the next case crosses a line even more clearly, because the next researchers didn't just observe disease, they helped create it on purpose. Guatemala, 1946 to 1948, U.S. health officials ran STD experiments on prisoners, soldiers, and patients, documented and later condemned. And decades later, the U.S. apologized. So, yes, this is real history, not a rumor. Sorry for interrupting, but this video is not sponsored. So if you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to subscribe. Now back to the video. Picture the setup: prisons, barracks, hospitals, people with limited power to refuse. The goal is prevention research, but the ethics are missing, no proper consent, and the target isn't just observation, it's controlled exposure, infection, and results. The researchers tried to produce infections in ways that mimicked real life. One documented method: using infected sex workers to transmit disease to prisoners. When it didn't spread reliably, they escalated. They moved to direct inoculation, meaning deliberate exposure by medical means. Think about the psychological reality. You're told a procedure is routine. You might not even realize anything has been done to you until symptoms appear, and even then, you don't know why. Confusion becomes fear because your body is doing something new and nobody is explaining it. Decades later, when the story became public, U.S. officials apologized and called it reprehensible. That apology matters, not because it erases the damage, but because it confirms this was not rumor. It was policy-level failure, written down and carried out. Scholarly reviews report at least 1,308 people intentionally infected with syphilis, gonorrhea, or chancroid, plus many more tested. And it wasn't random, it's a deliberate act against people who couldn't say no. Now we reach the final case, the one that feels like a nightmare because it happened inside war and secrecy, inside a system built to turn humans into materials, not patients, not citizens, not enemies, just materials. It was called Unit 731, a Japanese military program based in occupied China during World War II. It researched biological and chemical warfare and conducted lethal human experiments on prisoners. And what it was like inside is the closest thing to a human being becoming a lab instrument. And that's why it's terrifying. The calmness, the way a hallway can look ordinary while something inhuman is happening behind a door. Picture the first moment. You're taken from your life, your farm, your street, your village, and moved into a place that doesn't treat you as human. Testimony and historical research describe prisoners being used for infection studies, freezing experiments, and other lethal procedures. Then the language changes. Not patients, not people, categories. And once you're a category, cruelty becomes research. Unit 731 built a whole pipeline. Keep prisoners alive until experiments, record outcomes, then remove evidence. That's why there are reports of no survivors from the facility itself. Their biological warfare work included pathogens like plague, cholera, anthrax, typhoid, plus delivery methods. One documented focus: breeding plague-infected fleas and designing munitions that could disperse them. Some experiments focused on survival in extreme exposure, like frostbite research described in historical accounts. The point wasn't treatment. It was thresholds. How long until failure? What conditions accelerate damage? What interventions change outcomes? It's terrifying because it treats the body like a machine you can stress test. And the most haunting part is routine. Staff arrive. Notes get written. Results get filed. Next subject. For the victims, time becomes a loop. The same hallway, the same footsteps. After the war, unlike some Nazi doctors who were prosecuted, many connected to Unit 731 avoided trial. Historical accounts describe U.S. decisions not to prosecute in exchange for data. That's the shared pattern in all four stories. Institutions tell themselves a story. Necessary. Progress. Greater good. But inside the experiment, the story is simpler. Your life is being spent like currency. And the scariest part? Nobody feels like a villain while doing it, because the system rewards it. And that's why these don't leave your brain. They force the question, if it happened then, under authority, funding, and law, what prevents it now, under new tech and new language? Because history doesn't repeat perfectly. It upgrades. The labels change. The logic stays. Modern research ethics, consent, oversight, review boards exist because of disasters like these. But rules only work when people enforce them. And the uncomfortable truth is, systems fail when everyone says, "Not my job." This is what it was like to be used as a human experiment. Not just suffering, but being treated like your suffering didn't count. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help out the channel reach 100K this year.